what they call the disco backlash did catch me by surprise, because I just couldn't understand, if you don't like a certain kind of music, then don't listen. You know, nobody's making anybody listen to it. And so I began to believe that that whole thing was started by someone who felt that the popularity of disco was dipping into their pockets. People were buying their records instead of, because let's face it, disco music was mostly popular among young people, and young people are the ones who go to the store going, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, you know, which record should I buy today? And so if they were buying my music instead of somebody else's, then probably not the artist, but certainly some record companies or, you know, people, producers or whatever, may have been getting a little bit miffed, and I always believed that that whole thing was started by them.
I didn't see the disco backlash coming because I felt everybody was happy, people were dancing, it was a great feel, it created a new kind of lifestyle. The problem obviously was that it became a little too repetitive, so like one song was very close to the next one, and the next one very similar. The drum were kind of the same, so it started to become a little boring.
I think Saturday Night Fever may have contributed to the disco backlash. I think, you know, with anything, there's a moment in time where you look around and you can't get away from something, and it was really wall to wall. It was everywhere. And it might have been brewing. I mean, as a friend of mine in the record business always told me, nothing destroyed the record business faster than disco, because you couldn't listen to anything else.
The whole Disco Sucks movement really broke my heart. Even though Chic, we didn't think of ourselves as a disco band. We didn't think that they were talking about us. We didn't think that they were talking about us until there was a big music industry function in New York at a club. And the same people that loved us only 6 months before were like on the other side of the room. They threw this place in a big restaurant that had a disco inside the restaurant. And so the room where the dance floor was had a sign over it that said disco. I swear to God, not one person from the big music industry would walk over that threshold into that room that said disco. They were all huddled in this bar because they didn't want to walk into the room that said disco, because disco sucks and the trend was changing, and God forbid that they be a part of that. So Bernard and myself, we did what I thought was the single most revolutionary event of my entire Black Panther life, was walk into that room and sit on that stage and be proud to representing disco, because up until that day, we never thought of ourselves as a disco act. And I just said, look at these guys, Bernard. These are the heroes of our industry. These are the brave people that say, no, Alice Cooper, nah, nah, Rolling Stones, man, rock and roll, blah, blah, blah. They're afraid because they're going to appear to not be cool now. And we proudly went into that disco, and it was just he and I by ourselves in that room for about an hour and a half. No one would come in there except for the surfing people.
Kind of an interesting phenomenon for me, because I managed KISS, and I also managed Donna Summer. And the people who loved KISS are the people who killed disco. You know, it came out of the Midwest, a roaring kind of, you know, disco sucks, you know, kind of thing. And I think, and I always wonder if this is going to happen to rap today, everything was disco all of a sudden. You know, it started with the independent labels. It went to the majors. And then all of a sudden, everything you heard was disco. It was disco on your ads, and disco in the elevators, and disco clothes. And, you know, everything was promoted with disco music. And it got, you know, all the movies. It was too much. And eventually it broke. And it kind of became not cool for the people who originally started to dance there. It wasn't hip anymore. You know, so in came punk, and in came heavy metal, and all the rest of that. But the truth is, it never went away.
Well, being called disco had a huge effect on the band, because disco was dying, which meant we were getting ready to lose our record deal. You know, if disco is dying, then you're not going to have too many disco artists signed to major labels. It changed with the times. Fortunately, though, what some people may not know is that A Taste of Honey was very big in Japan. So our first record, Boogie, was a success worldwide. Thank you, Jesus. Worldwide. And the second album, as Capitol Records told me, you only sold 450,000 copies. So you are a failure. You know, and it's like, 450,000? You know what I would do to sell 450,000 then or now? So we went to Japan. We spent a lot of time in Japan. Our second album was gold in Japan. It wasn't gold here, but it was gold in Japan. I mean, green is green all around the world.